Hi friends, Mindy here. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be creating a little mini journal for my devotional from Bythewell4god, which is Growing in Truth this month. And I have pulled out the little seed packets and the file folders that were the coordinating items for this month. And I'm actually going to use these to create a little mini journal. You can kind of see I've already started sort of piecing this together just to get the layout the way that I wanted, which is why I have all of those paper clips on there. And I'm just going to add a cover to the front and the back. I'm not going to add a spine. I'll show you how I work around that, but I want the spine to be open because I know that by the time I add everything in here, this is going to get, pretty chunky. So it's a small little journal. It measures roughly 3.5, I think, by 5 inches. But there's a lot of pockets because even the things that I glued together to make pockets, if that makes sense. And of course, the seed packets are just, begging to be pockets in my opinion. So that's what we're going to do with them. So I'm just measuring my seed packets here. Obviously, I want my covers to be slightly larger than the largest piece that I'm going to be using. So again, I'm marking on this piece of bookboard. So this is a little bit heavier than just my normal chipboard that I would use. And so there's a couple concessions that I need to make for that. So the first is I have to use a knife and a ruler just because my trimmer won't really like this bookboard. So whenever you're doing this, you do want to make sure that you're using the steel edge of a ruler, because those knives can actually cut into other rulers and damage them. Just ask me how I know that. But I'm going several very shallow swipes. So I'm just going down multiple times. Whenever you have something this thick, it's just better to go in multiple tries than to try and do it all at once, because your blade is not going to be able to get through it anyway. And then even then, I didn't get all the way through it. You saw how many times I did that. So I just had to kind of cut that back section off. And then I'm just pulling out my little sanding disc from Tim Holtz here just to kind of clean up that edge. And then I will use that first piece as a template to cut out my second piece so that I have my front and back covers. And I'm going to be covering those pieces of bookboard in the paper from Bythewell4god. So I just kind of went through, tried to decide which ones to use. There were so many beautiful ones. It was kind of hard to decide. In the end, I went with these ones that kind of look like collage strips. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm using double-sided adhesive for this. I probably could have used a liquid glue, honestly, because this chipboard is so thick. I don't think that it would have warped, but this is just my preferred method to do this and to do it quickly. So I'm adding this double-sided adhesive. This is the scrapbook.com version. Of course, there are others out there that you can use. This is just my kind of go-to one, and I like it because it comes in different sizes and widths, and so it kind of works for multiple purposes, especially if you want to wrap a book cover quickly. So I'm pulling back my release papers here. They do overlap a little bit, these two pieces of adhesive, which is fine. You won't notice it underneath the paper, especially because this paper is nice and thick. So this release paper was giving me a little bit of a fit, so I'm going to pull out a little tool just to help me pull that back. And then I'm looking at these papers. When I want my covers to look similar, obviously they're going to be the same paper, but I'm going to try to kind of focus on different sections of the paper. So I'm lining this paper up on my grid mat. I didn't mention this, but I am working on a self-healing mat, so make sure that your surface is protected if you're cutting anything. And then I'm just kind of lining this up. I'm trying to give myself roughly 1/2 inch around for a border for this, for when I trim it down, because my chipboard is really thick, but also the Bythewell4god paper is really thick. And I have just found that a little bit extra length when you're wrapping just makes it a little bit easier to work with. So I don't really measure exactly, but in this instance, I actually just used my Tim Holtz ruler to trim down the paper just a little bit. It just kind of worked really well because it does have that grid on there. And like I said, I gave myself roughly 1/2 inch. I know some people will tell you to wrap a little bit less than that, but I always kind of do a little bit bigger section. I just feel like I have more control over it, and I feel like I get better results. So because this paper from Bythewell4god is so thick though, one of the things I need to do is go around the edge. I go around all the edge of the chipboard with this bone folder just to kind of soften and kind of start breaking up the fibers of the paper. And you'll see I'm kind of rolling this around the edges. I'm not folding it yet. This is going to help it so that it doesn't crack. just kind of working the paper just a little bit before I do any actual gluing. And then I'm cutting out those little corner sections so that I get a nice mitered corner, doing that on all 4 corners. And then I'm going to do the same thing to this other cover. And I did put this on a different section of the paper, so they'll be similar but not exact. And then I'm going through with now another double-sided adhesive. This is just a smaller version of it. And I'm going to take all of the release papers off here. Again, just struggling with them, so I use a little pokey tool. It just helps me to get it up off of there. I don't know why sometimes I struggle with it, but sometimes it comes right off and other times it doesn't. So anyway, when you are wrapping a cover of any kind, you want to start with opposite sides. So I am starting with the long sides first, and then I'll do the top and bottom. And you can see with this in particular, I'm kind of rolling it up on the edge and then around, and that's just going to make sure that my paper is nice and tight against that chipboard when I wrap it all the way around and it grabs that adhesive. So I'm going to add a little bit of liquid glue just right here on the ends of these short sections, just because there's no exposed adhesive anymore in those 2 little sections. And so I'm doing the same exact process, just kind of rolling the chipboard up on its edge and then around. I find that just gives me a really nice tight corner, really clean edge there. I'm just kind of tucking that little bit of piece of there's like a little hanging section, just tucking that in, and then you can kind of see it this way. Also, when you kind of roll it like that, it helps it so that your paper doesn't crack. Sometimes the really heavy papers, they can crack if you kind of fold them. And then this is the section where I'm going to try to use this fabric. I have had this fabric in my stash, and I need to attach the first section of my little, I'm going to call it a text block, even though that's not really what it is because it's, file folders or whatever. But I want to add this first section to my cover, and I want to use this fabric that I have. Originally I thought about using just one of the pieces of pattern paper, but I'm afraid for the wear and tear over time that's not going to be the best way, and I need it to be flexible as well. So I'm going to use this fabric. Like I said, I've had this fabric in my stash forever. It just happened to match really well, and so I want to hide this back behind this seed packet, and this will make more sense when I actually get all of this glued down. So again, back with my scrapbook.com tape here, and I'm going to line this up probably a million times back and forth just to make sure that I get this the way that I want to. And even in the end, I almost did the fabric backwards, because I want the pretty side of the fabric to be on the outside, because it's going to be visible because my entire spine is exposed. So I'm kind of laying this down where I want this to go. And this was one of those things where I kind of had this idea in my head, and I just kind of turned on the camera and was like, well, we'll just kind of figure it out as we go. In the end, I can actually see a couple things I would have done differently, but that's kind of always the way. So you can kind of see I added that adhesive, and now I'm not going to attach it quite yet to the cover. I want to add this next piece. So this first seed packet is going to glue to this front section of this first file folder. And you can kind of see I'm just making sure I'm getting everything where I want it to go. And I was trying to decide where I wanted to line these up, because the file folder and the seed packet are not exactly the same size. And what I want, though, is to have another little pocket here. So I'm only gluing this down on 3 sides. So I have my seed packet that's going to have a pocket, and then in between the seed packet and the first little section of the file folder is going to be a pocket, and then the file folder will actually be a space for me to use as well. So I'm going to try to kind of make this make a little bit more sense. Maybe just seeing it will. I'm probably just not explaining it very well. And I almost had this upside down. So again, it was kind of a learning. It was, a little bit of learning as I go. Sometimes I like to just randomly see if I can figure things out. I don't know why I do that to myself, but now I'm just trying to line this up. So because obviously my cover is a little bit bigger than my seed packet. So the fabric that I cut, though, is only the size of the height of the seed packet, and maybe just a little bit longer just because I wanted the little frayed edges hanging down, but it is not the same height as my cover, if that makes sense. So I'm adding a little bit of that double-sided adhesive there, right on the edge. And this little piece of fabric is now going to act like the hinge. So this would be like the inner paper of a book, if that makes sense. So I'm just kind of holding that fabric down. I'm lining this up. I'm trying to get the little seed packet and file folder centered on the cover. And now you can kind of see, and then that will all get covered when I put an inner paper on the inside of the cover. So for now, I'm just going to go through the process of gluing all of these pieces together, and I'm doing them all on 3 sides so that they're pockets. So it's kind of going to go alternating, file folder to file folder. And really the way that the pattern ends up working is it's almost like all of the file folders are glued together, and inside each of the file folders, I have glued a seed packet, if that makes sense, but I glued them on opposite sides. So on one side, it's on the left, and then on the next time through, it's on the right, just to give it a little bit of variety. And so it will actually end up making it so that there are a couple of file folders that are tucked in between 2 seed packets. So it's almost like a little hidden pocket, which is something that I really love. And so, but I will show you a flip through of all of that, how it kind of works at the end, but you can kind of see, I'm just going through and gluing all of these together. The only place where that pattern does not actually go all the way through is the very first seed packet is on the outside of the file folder, and the very last seed packet is not in that exact order. But other than that, all the way through, it's basically a file folder with a seed packet glued inside, either on the left hand page or on the right hand page. So now we're at the end, and have that seed packet again, and I'm just making sure that I'm going to be putting my glue on the right spot. So I actually made a little pencil mark for myself this time, and then adding that adhesive here. So now my seed packet again is going to be on the outside of the file folder, and it's going to hinge to the back cover in the same exact way that the first piece did. And so I'm just doing the same process. I have my fabric. I'm using my double-sided adhesive. Same exact process all the way through this. And I apologize if I'm not explaining this very well. It was a little confusing to myself as I was kind of working on it too. And it's sometimes hard to explain what was in my brain at the time. But again, just going through here and adding the fabric. I almost did it again with the wrong side. I wanted the little frayed bits on the top. So you can kind of see how this is going to work. Now, this one was a little bit trickier to for some reason, to keep my paper or my fabric in place. And I will say that if you do decide to create like a pocket or a journal like this where you're gluing the file folders together, just make sure that you're lining them on top of each other and keeping the edges very straight. So that was one thing I was very careful about, was making sure that all of my file folders lined up really well. And that will just help with the structure and stability of the whole journal. And so I am going to now add this last piece of fabric to the back cover, doing the same exact process. I'm just going to kind of hold that fabric down. I'm going to kind of line this back cover up now with the front cover. I want to make sure that when it's closed, everything is nice and even, but it's basically got an exposed spine now. Now, certainly you could, add a piece of fabric that went from one cover to the other. And I wanted the spine to be exposed. I wanted to be able to see the little file folders, and I'm going to use this ribbon that I have had, this trim, and I've had it in my stash forever, and I just thought it would make a super cute closure. But what I'm going to do is just only put it on the back section, because it's going to be pretty thick underneath there when I add the paper. So I'm just going to have this one little section, and then the journal will close, and then it will just wrap around the journal a few times. So you can see I'm adding a lot of adhesive here. I'm using art glitter glue for that because it dries nice and quickly. And that will be my back cover. And then I cut down 2 of the other pattern papers from the devotional kit, the coordinating papers. And now I'm just adding a bunch of liquid glue. You could certainly add scrapbook.com adhesive, which is normally what I would do, except I needed a little bit of time to kind of make sure I could get this wiggled into the right exact spot. And so sometimes you don't have that with the double-sided adhesive. It's very sticky. So once it's down, it's down. And so you can see here, I'm just kind of having to slide it around just a little bit. So I was glad that I went with liquid glue. Like I said, normally I don't. And so this just worked out well. And I really wanted to do this because I knew I had that extra piece of fabric in the back. And so I wanted to make sure I was getting everything covered very well with this. I did end up adding a little binder clip to this edge where the trim is, just for a few minutes, just to make sure that that paper stays down nice and tight. I'm going to go around and kind of hold everything down with my hand here just until I can get that binder clip on there. And then, so that's basically how the journal is going to work. I'm going to show you a little quick flip through here of how I mean with the pockets. You can see I have this open exposed edge with those two pieces of fabric there. And then it's going to have all of these pockets. So you have the seed packet as a pocket, and then over here there's a pocket. And then the file folder itself could become a pocket. In between the file folders are pockets. This one, I meant for the file folder to go the other direction. So it would have like a tab and, a tab and not a tab. I'll probably just make a tab for it because it's hard to get into that pocket. And here is that section where they look like little, kind of secret hidden pockets, which I actually really love. And so I think it's going to be a lot of fun to work through this devotional in this little tiny journal. So if you like this video, if you stuck around this long, I really appreciate it. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel. If you haven't already, join my Facebook group as well. That information will be in the description. And until next time, bye.